Well, after that last little video about the ride across the Texas desert and through the town of Langtree, I figured it's probably a good idea to expand upon what happened to me some years before that on a similar ride through the same town. Now, unfortunately, I just don't have any pictures for this thing, but it's a real event, it's what really happened, and it's one I ain't never gonna forget. So I'm coming through, and I remember being really tired and just wanting to get on to Del Rio where I was going to bed down. But I like to ride through Langtree on my way. So I rode in and I thought, you know, I'm going to ride down this road and see if I can see the Rio Grande River from the end. So I did, and you can't. So I turn around and I'm coming back, and as I'm coming by this little house, there's two guys standing in the driveway and they're looking at me real hard as I go by. And as I went by, I just like smelled an adventure. And back then when I was a young man, I chased any adventure and any skirt incessantly. No apologies. That's just who I was, and that's just what happened. My old magazine stories really reflect that from back then. So anyways, I smelled this adventure. So I turn around and I go back and I pull into the driveway and I shut my motor off. And I'm looking at these guys and they're looking at me, and one of them says to me, he says, well, he says, you know, you're the first guy I ever seen come around here on one of them things. Ain't got a whole herd of others behind him and a motorhome behind that. He said, well, you might as well come in and have some dinner. We got goat meat stew cooking on the stove. So I introduced myself, and I'm talking to Clay and Jim Bob, right? So he goes on in the house, and Jim Bob sits down at the table, and Clay's attending to the stove. It's his house, right? And Clay, he's drinking beer, but Jim Bob, he's backing it with whiskey. So he's getting a buzz going. So Clay says to me, he said, go on in there and get yourself a shower, man. He said, there's a shower in the back here. Go ahead. So I go out and get my stuff, and I come back and I grab a shower. Now, when I come out, Jim Bob, he's got a pretty good buzz going. I sit down at the table, and he looks at me, and he says, you know, he says, it sure caused a lot of trouble when somebody castrated the mayor of that town and stuck his nuts in my freezer, and when they found him there, it sure caused a lot of trouble. And this caught me flat-footed, right? So I looks at Clay, and Clay says, oh yeah, he says, Jim Bob was working in this little town over there, and he's renting this little room while he's working there, staying in this little room, and somebody castrated the mayor, stuck his nuts in the freezer, and when they found him there, he said, but you know, it could have been anybody stuck them nuts in them freezer. He said, lots of people rent that little room, didn't necessarily have to be Jim Bob. And I turned back to Jim Bob, and he says, yeah. He says, and they figure it was me because when we was down at the bar and I bought my buddy one of them good expensive beers, and my buddy said, I'm going to go over here and give this beer to the mayor. And Jim Bob said, you give that fancy beer to the mayor, and I'm going to go and castrate that old goat. And I looked back at Clay and I says, old goat? He says, oh yeah. He says, in that town, man, every time elections come up, they put that goat on the ballot, and there's no law saying a goat can't be mayor. And that stinky bastard's been in office for as long as I could remember. So I turns back to Clay, or I turns back to Jim Bob, and I said, now let me get this straight. You allegedly castrated the mayor / beer drinking goat, and now they want to send you up the river for 10 years? He's looking at 10 years in prison because he's an elected official. And he says, let's get that terminology straight. Allegedly, he says it's still a hung jury. Right? See, they got a beer drinking goat. They bring him down to the bar and people buys him beers. This is a real fucking story. I went and looked it up on the internet. I'll leave you guys a link or two to what I found on it down in the Dropbox below, right? So we hang around, and eventually Jim Bob goes home. It's night by now. He's got a little dirt bike. He goes out there and he takes it on home. Clay offers me the couch. And I told him, I said, nah, you know, I want to sleep outside. Back then I used to sleep out without a tent a lot. And I wanted to sleep in the Texas desert because it's dead silent out there. There's no crickets or nothing under that huge sky, right? It's just something I wanted to do. So I slept in the yard. And in the morning, Clay comes out and wakes me up. And he says, man, you know, he says, I got to go to work. But there's coffee in there, and there's bacon, and there's eggs. You go in and make yourself at home, get yourself some breakfast, and we'll see you next time you come through, right? So, I mean, it was the kind of thing that you never really forget, or at least I've never forgotten. And it all happened right there in the town of Langtree, Texas. So what do you think? Do you think Jim Bob's guilty or not? I know the truth, but I'm not telling. Now, I want to, of course, remind you guys that we have the Gypsy Gene Cancer Run coming up, which is going to, in May 15th, I think it's going to be a 3-day event. It's a camp out, but the town's close by. Anybody who wants to can get a room. It's a beautiful place, man. And I think it's like 80 miles north of New Orleans. I'll leave you guys a flyer at the end of this. It's got phone numbers you can call. Princess Scotty's not me. That's the other Scotty. There's two Scotties here, okay? Sometimes people are calling him thinking it's me, but it's not. And so if you come, I'll see you there. I'm also, of course, going to leave you links to some of my other stuff, my book, and some other stuff down there. So I hope you go look at it. And I hope to see some of you guys over at Cancer Run. And if not, maybe I'll see you on the road somewhere. But I will for sure see you on the next video.